Today, once more, my name is Chris Cardone. I lead our customer success team here at Unstack. We're bringing you this because we want to help everybody up their personal branding, and who better to bring on unless it's Sara and Bridget. They're literally the pros at this. So we're going to talk about finding your voice, growing your community, and also growing your career. But without further ado, I'd love to present our actual two speakers today and let them introduce themselves. So I'll hand the mic off to Sara Pion.
That's okay. Hi, I'm Sara. I am currently the brand content manager at Alyce. I've been there for about 9-ish months. Basically, whenever the pandemic started, that's when I started at Alyce. I had like 2.5 weeks in the office, and then we all went remote. And I've been doing all forms of content for them, whether that's on the website, through our customers, on social media, through video, through podcasts, through anything that you could possibly imagine. And it's been really fun. And on the side, I have a podcast with Bridget.
What's the name of that podcast, in case for like the one person that doesn't know it?
It's called Self-Control and Cheese. And we talk about self-control. We talk about cheese. We also talk about career growth and professional development, and just like essentially what we want to know in our 20s while we're in our 20s, and just documenting that whole fun process of not really knowing what you're doing with your life and
Amazing.
normalizing that.
So Sara's obviously brilliant. So another brilliant person joining us is Bridget Poetker. Bridget, can you tell everybody a bit about yourself?
Yeah, currently I'm the digital marketing manager at a company called BigTime. What does that mean? It means that I handle a lot of paid and organic acquisition, and I'm kind of responsible for getting ourselves in the company into new channels and just kind of testing everything and getting ourselves out there. Yeah, and then on the side, we do the podcast, and it's been crazy, but it's fun. It's fun to tell a lot of people that you don't know what you're doing and see what it does to your imposter syndrome. So
I love that. Okay, so now that we have both of you guys introed, let's chat about what we're going over today. So we're going to talk first about growing your career, which is probably a huge thing, especially with everything going on in the world. I feel like with work from home, there's like a mix of it's easier to expand your career, it's easier to move through jobs, but we also want to keep our engagement up and keep chatting with others, making that wow-worthy content. I hope you guys can agree, everybody with like a keyboard in front of them today, I feel like just everybody's posting on social media, so it's becoming harder and harder to stand out. So this will be a really great time to address how to actually stand out, how to be yourself for moving on, how to be consistent with it. And then lastly, you don't only want to be the one holding the megaphone, you also want to interact with others who have their own megaphones. So engaging with the network you've built and the community that you're building around yourself. But without further ado, I'll let Bridget and Sara take it away from here.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about growing your career. That's sort of Bridget and my bread and butter. We're still rather early on in our career, so we want to start creating as many opportunities for ourselves as possible, which inherently gives us more content to create on social media platforms to help us build those personal brands. And so the first aspect of growing your career is taking a more proactive instead of reactive approach. So go out of your way to create learning opportunities for yourself. The more you experience, the more you can share. And not only will this make your content and experiences more engaging, but you'll actually be getting better at your job. This also goes for people who aren't currently employed, looking for new jobs, looking for their next opportunity. There's so much free content online right now. There's so many certification courses. There's so much content that is being put out in all channels, whether that's like TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever. And so take it upon yourself to go and like seek out more learning opportunities. But on the other side of that, if you are totally swamped in your current role, don't add more to your plate. Instead, take this time to actually talk to your manager and understand how you can time manage, delegate work, prioritize your work so you don't feel so overwhelmed, but you're still creating those opportunities for growth because you're learning how to lead indirectly by delegating work out to others. So, yes, creating learning opportunities for yourself we're big advocates for that.
Yeah, I think too, a lot of times when we're talking about growing our careers, we only think about our careers and how it only affects us. And we don't think about how there are literally so many people in the world that are doing the exact same thing as you're doing, are in the exact same like industries or whatever it is. And we need to work externally more. Set up coffee chats with people that you meet online, or I mean, that's how Sara and I literally started talking, is we met online, we met on Twitter. So uh, I just, there's, yes, you can look internally in your company, but there's so much to leverage for your own career with using other people, and how to kind of understand their experiences. Maybe you won't ever experience those things, but understanding their experiences can help you understand maybe your coworkers' experience or other things like that. So I think we do a lot of like introspection when we're looking to grow our careers, but we don't really do a good job at like looking at the landscape and trying to understand where other people's careers fit into your own.
Speaking of online certification courses, has there been any specific one you guys feel like you've taken a lot away from, especially where you're both in the digital side of marketing?
When I first started my role at Alyce, I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to be doing. That wasn't my manager's fault. It was more so just like I had a very wide swim lane and I didn't really know what was part of that swim lane. And so I took HubSpot social media certification course. I took Demand Base's ABM certification courses, just so that I could get a better understanding of like how this marketing team was structured and what I was supposed to be doing in it. And like 10 out of 10 would recommend both.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time at G2 in my last role, really digging into Google Analytics. All of that stuff is free. And that's like the first thing when somebody from college will LinkedIn message me, which if you're in college right now, like keep doing that. Keep reaching out to people that are in jobs that you want to be in. But that's free. I had to do it in college for like a extra credit project, but I obviously didn't actually do it when I was in college, so I had to redo it. But it's great for attribution and just really understanding like how customers move through for marketing. So get really familiar with Google Analytics. I think that that's a huge one too.
Agreed. Nice. I think this is a big one, at least for myself. So don't put yourself in a box. Like especially early on in your career, there's no need for you to have to specialize right away. There's that saying that people are going to have like 3 to 5 careers in their life, which means that you're going to change your job function 3 to 5 times. So immediately going deep on something is one way to go about things. Personally, I don't love it. Everyone wants that coveted, like T-shaped employee who has empathy and understanding for how other people are working, but then also can go deep on that one thing. And so I think, especially if you're looking to change careers or you're looking to get started with your first adult quote unquote role after college, try to get as much experience as you possibly can. There are a lot of quote unquote thought leaders out there who are saying, like, just say no to everything and only focus on the one thing that you're working towards. But if you haven't defined what that is yet, say yes to as much as you possibly can so that you can figure out what you hate and what you love. And then stop doing the things that you hate and start seeking out opportunities for the things that you love.
Yeah. And I also think that I've uniquely changed careers already 3 times in my 5 years. Like I started at an agency, then went client side, and that's one huge, massive change. And with my role at BigTime, I'm now doing something that I've never done at a SaaS company. And I like was straight up with my boss and telling him that from the beginning, like, I don't know how to do this, but I can figure it out. And I think that just being able to say that out loud is a huge, just, it pushes everything forward. And again, to what Sara was saying about understanding as you move up in your role, how to execute the things in your day to day, but understanding how the teams work together. That's what your boss is thinking about. That's what his boss is thinking about, or her boss. Like, the more that you can start to understand how the other teams are working, the faster you're going to fast track into those management jobs, if that's what you want, or into the senior level jobs. But I think there's so much to be said for kind of, I mean, I was victim to specializing too soon. And that's why I started kind of looking to LinkedIn and other places to get outside perspective on what I was doing, because especially in something like content marketing, where it's so T-shaped and so far down in one, it's so easy to put those blinders on. But you have to be able to explain how your work is leading to sales, is leading to, you know, some bigger company initiatives. So you have to understand how that works if you're going to go explain it, you know, if you're going to be justifying your work and your job higher up.
Agreed.
You can say that after every slide.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, Bridget, you know what? You make a great point. So when we talk about specifically building your personal brand and kind of working out loud, which is working towards or sharing your work externally, not just within your company, but on social media, which is like very scary. I personally was drawn to like, okay, I should talk about marketing because I'm a marketer. But I don't know a lot about marketing because I'm a youth and I haven't been doing it for very long. And I only have really like a one-sided view of it because I've really only seen the quote unquote new way that people are marketing, which is like conversational or personal or personalized. And I don't really have that like, I don't have the knowledge or the passion to really talk much about marketing that much. What I can talk about is my career progression into marketing and going from support into marketing and bouncing around from growth to demand gen to content to brand, and what I'm learning along the way, so that in a few years when I have experience in the world of marketing, people know me not only for my career growth, but also what I've done in my field.
Yeah, I think we oftentimes like really drill down on like a specific thing or win that we had, which is awesome, but we do a really bad job about saying, like, raising our hand and saying like, I screwed this up. Like, I messed this up. I didn't do this very well. But the big thing about that is everybody relates to that because everybody screws up. And that's something that I do a lot. So that's something that I post about a lot, is because that's how I feel that I move forward. Is we can't understand what's going to work if we don't understand what doesn't work. And those struggles and that kind of thing is what people relate to, and what that spurs conversations, and you take those conversations offline with those people, and then maybe you figure out a solution to your problem by just kind of getting out in front of it and saying like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's authenticity over perfection, because if someone's living a perfect life, all you're going to feel towards them is empathy or envy. You're going to be
Yeah.
why is your life that way when mine is kind of a shit show? Versus if you make yourself more approachable and you tell people about your successes, but also your failures, that's going to be more appealing to an audience you're trying to build if you are trying to build that audience. Chris asked, what's the biggest mess up that you've had that you've learned a ton from? I once was that person who pressed send on the email that went to so many people that it wasn't supposed to go to. And I remember like standing up at my desk because I didn't know what to do. And I just had like panic rise through my body. And I looked over at my manager and I was like, Matt, I fucked up.
Yeah.
And so in my immediate reaction is always to like hide the issue because I hate confrontation and I don't want people to know that I messed up. But if you can get ahead of it the minute it happens and like issue that apology or send that like, oops, our bad email or something along those lines, like make a statement, it's going to come across better and more human, like, oh, we all make mistakes, instead of like this company made a mistake and didn't talk about it. And so therefore I just think now that that's part of their business practices and I'm not really about that.
Yeah. My biggest mistake was, and this, it goes down in agency history as a big mess up. I added an extra 0 to a Facebook ad once, and it was bad. We spent client money and it was like screwed up all the metrics for the year. Like everything was so thrown off. I took it up. I like walked in, like slumped into my boss's office and was like, Jeremy. He was like, oh no, what's wrong? Cause I never called him by his whole name. And I was like, I spent $5,000 instead of $500. And the agency had called the client right away and was like, we're so sorry. The client ended up wanting to pay for it. The campaign ended up being fun. Like, obviously it crushed whatever we were supposed to be doing. And I sent a note to Facebook on like the off chance that they would respond. And they said they have for every marketer out there, they have a forgiveness program. So they gave us our money back, which is like unheard of. But
wow.
So yeah, it sucked. I mortified. Yeah, but we fixed that with we like now every time there's a senior manager that looks at the ads before they go out because me. Sorry.
But that's why people have QA processes at this point. So it happens. You learn. There are like so many mistakes that I've done where I'm like, well, I will literally never do that again. Like, good to know.
Yeah. And I think we can take it one step and talk about our own mistakes, but then it gives people a platform to talk about their mistakes and like think about my learnings from Sara's mistakes or my learnings from whoever else's mistakes. Like that's another way to create the opportunity for you to learn is if you're creating spaces that people feel like they can be honest and open. That's huge. You get all of the insight from all of their mistakes as well. So
and this is great coming from people who are in the weeds doing things like Bridget and myself. But if you hold a higher title or if you want to eventually hold a higher title, keep talking about these mistakes and these failures, because if every single one of your marketing campaigns or whatever it is that you're working on has performed perfectly, then I'm bored. Like you're not telling me a good story. And so that's why I think that sharing your mistakes not only benefits you in the long run, but also just like from a marketing perspective, you're telling a better story. People are going to be more involved because the hero faced adversity. We want to know what happened and how they dealt with it.
I couldn't agree more. So I run the webinar program here at Unstack, and a huge blog post that we put out was 4 things that I learned from like running 6 webinars. Fun fact, one of those things was we used to use an email marketing service where they had this fun button where if you checked a box, it only sent to the people who were already on the list. And if you're following with me, that means that every single person who registered for that webinar didn't get the email. So that was a fun mistake that we had that we like really quickly, 5 minutes before the webinar went live, fixed. But not only did we learn a lot from that, but we also were able to put those learnings out. And it actually is like one of our top performing blogs just because, I mean, it was actually pre-COVID, but now with COVID, everybody's doing webinars because we can't host in like person things. And it's also, those mistakes are things, thankfully now others hopefully don't have to do.
Even down to the title of that, it gives me context to say like, you actually did those things. I think a lot of times we put out content and it's 10 tips to whatever. And it's like, I don't know if you actually did that or not. So I don't know where to put that. Like, what do I do with that? But you saying like, we screwed up these 6 times and these are the 6 things that we learned. That's like the perfect way to kind of put that out there.
It also makes it more specific. Like if you're like 10 tips to like grow your Instagram and one of the tips is post more.
Right.
I'm just like, I'm bored. I don't think that you actually have grown an Instagram. I think that you just stole this list from another blog that posted the same thing.
Right.
But anyways,
let's
talk about making better content. Hey. So I learned this kind of while I was starting to figure out what I wanted to post, because I still to this day and like always will probably have those days where I'm like, I don't know what to say. Like I have nothing to say today. And it's always the post that you think about or the ideas that come to you immediately and you just write them down, hit send, close your laptop, that do the best, and you just can't recreate that process unless you like spend your entire life trying to do that. But I think a really easy way to start to narrow your focus and understand like what you want to be known for and what you want to put a lot of time in, and choose just that one genre that people can rely on you for content about. And if you stray from that genre, like that's totally fine, and like play around with new things, but really start to think about like what you want to talk the most about. So something that you're actually passionate about, something that doesn't bore you, and something that you want to continue to like progress in. Because if I was perfect at something, and it would just be boring at that point, because I wouldn't remember like what what the issues were that led me to get good at this one thing. So that means that sometimes my content doesn't really resonate with like my dad, even though he reads and texts me about all of my posts, which is very nice of me. It's V supportive, but sometimes he doesn't really understand what's going on. And that's totally fine because I'm trying to talk to people who are like my age, going through the same shit, going through and thinking the same things. So it really helps when your own subject matter is yourself and you just
Yep.
talk about yourself, which seems like very egotistical, but that's kind of what building a personal brand is. Like you have to be on your side because not a lot of people are going to be purely just looking out for you.
Yeah, and Dan Pion is also one of my favorite new followers. He likes all my stuff too. I love it so much.
He's a real.
But an example for us is like we really push the podcast on 20 somethings, and we do get a little bit of feedback sometimes on Twitter or wherever that like, well, this also applies to 30 somethings. Like, what about 30 somethings? And I'm like, that's awesome. And it's great. And we know that it does because they're normal things that happen in a work environment.
But like sometimes 20 somethings don't know that these are normal things that happen in a work.
Right, exactly. We don't know enough about work yet. We don't, especially this year, like everything that we've known about work has changed completely. Like it helps us have context for when we write content or create content before we actually do it. If we just have a specific, like that's why you have ICP. Like that's the reason that so that when you're writing it is you can think about, is this going to resonate with this audience? And if it resonates with any other audience, like that's bonus points. And that just means that it's good content.
All right. I really like this one because I think that storytelling is kind of, I've been getting a lot of influence from YouTube influencers, literally. They have really unclear marketing lessons, but if you listen carefully, they're there. And so today I was watching one where this person was saying like, how do I create more engaging content that people actually want to listen or watch so that YouTube prioritizes my videos? Like, no. And it's like showing, not telling. So you can say like, I went and did this thing, or you can like bring people along for the journey. So like just saying or talking about things that you're working on once it's over is not as engaging as like, hey, I'm going to start doing this thing and I'm going to like incrementally try and get to this end goal in 30 days, like follow along with my journey and like see how it goes. I think one person who's really good at this is Connor Gross, who we had on the podcast. He's building out loud every single day on Twitter. He's like, he made an ad in like a minute and like tried to get subscribers to his newsletter, check back in 30 days later. He was like, well, this drove 12 signups, like did not work, like back to the drawing board. Don't post for the algorithms because then inherently you're not posting for people who want to engage with your content. And like the reason why some posts do better than others isn't because you post more and you're figuring it out, is because you have something to say. If you don't have something to say, like don't pull something out of your ass, just like be quiet that day. Like it's fine.
Yeah. No one's going to miss you if you don't post on LinkedIn for a day. Like, sorry to tell you. And I think I just hear it all the time. Like you have to post on LinkedIn every day to make the algorithm friendly to you. And it's like, no, because by that theory, like I could post whatever I wanted every day and it would work, and it's not going to work.
Also, some of those people I've muted because their content happened so often and was not
it's shallow,
valuable that I was just like, I don't need this.
It creates that echo chamber. It creates that person saying the same thing over and over again to kind of game the system. And like, I don't know about you guys, but like, I don't like to be gamed. Like, I'm not, that's not why I scroll LinkedIn or Twitter. Like I want to hear from people about their real experiences. And I say something with your posts. If you're not saying anything, then I don't want to read it. That's how you get all of just those people that like and don't read any of the posts. Like there's too many of those people out there too.
Yeah, that's when you like have an engagement pod and then you feel sad because your numbers or your life is dictated by numbers, versus like me and Bridget were literally talking today that we have this kind of small but mighty community that actually engages with us. Like we get responses to our podcast emails, and people DM us after they listen to our episodes, or they DM us after they see a post that we made and they're like, hey, I really liked this, or like, hey, this made me think about this, and we get to have a conversation. So I don't want that to go away just by obsessing over vanity metrics. And I think this kind of goes along with how to figure out what to post or tweet about. It doesn't come from the air. Like, go out and like read a book, listen to a podcast, like experience something and like write your thoughts and opinions on that. Like, if you love murder podcasts, one, tell me about it because I listen to My Favorite Murder religiously. So like, let's talk about it. But two, like use some of the lessons. Like, I'm out here finding lessons from YouTube influencers about marketing. Like there's lessons out there for you to find. But like, if you're just obsessing over content to create, it's not going to come. It's like watching a kettle boil versus like, I'm just going to look at the world and try and find stuff that interests me. And then you'll inherently have things to say. And that's really like woo woo and like not very tactical. But like, whenever I don't have an idea, I like listen to the Jocko podcast, or I listen classic, or I watch like I watch YouTube, or if I disconnect my brain for a little bit, and it's always at those times where things come to you, or like listen to an audiobook. Listen to Simon Sinek Start With Why, because that really helps you understand like the what and the why you're working towards. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah, I think and I'm just going to reiterate, like we live in a world of content, and we grew up in a, like for 20 somethings, we grew up in a world of content. So we're constantly inundated with this stuff. And I would so much rather be really connected to a small group of people than like be worried about what everybody else in the world is doing, because what's actually adding to my life, right? Same thing with your career. Like, what's actually adding to your career are the 10 people that you can slide into their DMs if you have a question. And you're not going to get that by just posting crap content and just getting your LinkedIn following up. It doesn't matter.
I think this one I learned at Drift specifically, right? Like You Speak, they were very conversational. That was their whole thing of like, break through the noise of B2B. Like, we're different, like we're human, but like, that's real life. If you use business jargon in your post, it's not going to come off as like, do you actually say that in real life? Is that like who you are? In which case, like, I don't know if I want to hang out with you later. Someone actually messaged me about this, and this is one of the like eye roll conversations that turned into a good conversation, where he asked me why I say like in my post and why I use filler words. And I said, because I'm 25 and that's how I speak right now. But also I have a very specific way that I like to talk that I think comes off when I speak, but not so much so when I write. And I wanted to change that. So I started using more conjunctions. I started using more slang words. I started swearing. Like, I swear sometimes.
Shocker.
I'm an adult. Let it happen. They're like, I don't know like what 12-year-olds are on LinkedIn, but like, don't go on like TikTok. You don't need to be here right now. But imagine trying to tell a story about your life and using business jargon or using like very formal language. It just doesn't resonate as well as you being really excited about a story that you want to tell your friends and saying it in the way that you would normally. This goes back to the no one knows your life and no one has your life. So no one has your tone of voice. Leverage your tone of voice. You have like, that is your brand, however it is that you talk.
Think about like John just threw it in the chat. Like if you were telling a family story and you used like, let's circle back or like streamline. No. I'm gonna streamline this dinner right now. Like, are you kidding? What are you doing? I think that this was something that I also learned when I was writing full time for my job. Is at G2, my first topic was app development, which hilarious. Didn't know anything about app development, but I realized that our readers are not developers. They were marketing people that wanted to also understand app development. So maybe I was actually the best person to be writing about this, because I also didn't understand app development. So I started relating things to like real life, like APIs to pancakes, or I wrote a guest article for Drift, and I put a Mean Girls like GIF in there, and they were like, we loved this so much. Like the more that you can create those experiences, the better. And when I've had multiple people on LinkedIn that know me, that when they read my LinkedIn content, they're like, I read that in your voice because it's exactly like you speak. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I think it's a great thing. Like, I like movies. I use a ton of movie quotes in my content. It also is something that like relates people together. And yeah, I mean, for better or worse, Sara and I swear a lot, and we're trying to be on our best behavior here. But like, I go as far as to sometimes say those words on LinkedIn. I think once I used, like I said, buttload on LinkedIn once.
Yeah,
And people laughed.
that's
And
a
people
measurement.
laughed. It really is. Yeah, it's a unit of measure.
I think that's in
but,
the empirical system.
Yeah.
The metric system.
Yeah.
No, that's,
and
yeah.
I think this all works great because I think that every single company is also leveraging towards conversational movement, especially Sara, you coming from Drift. And we talk about a lot about this casual tonality of speech. For people, because I know that there are a few in our crowd that come from agencies, obviously formality is still something that has to come through those posts. How would you kind of augment that advice for somebody who still has to speak to a professional audience and in some cases is speaking on behalf of a brand that they can't necessarily inject that language?
I think you're still talking to people, and there is that like empathy element of appealing to another person, not a business trying to sell to another business and like two buildings getting together in a conference room and like having building talk. It's you're a person talking to another person. You don't have to use yeet and like slang in your posts, but I think even as far as going, even as like small as doing conjunctions instead of cannot but can't, it reads more conversational and it reads more like something that someone would actually say and not what businesses want to hear. I think simplifying your language and not using crazy buzzwords, but just explain what you want to explain, like you're talking to your grandma who has no idea what supercharge means and has no idea what a funnel is. Like, what do you do? Use your words, don't use jargon. And I think that you can still come off as professional and know what you're saying, but you don't sound like you just were a computer generated script that like only looked at buzzwords and doesn't actually have any personality.
I would say too, another piece of that is like shorten what you're saying as much as you can. I think that's as a marketer, like I'm guilty of it myself. Like, it's so much easier to write the long thing than it is to write the short thing, right? But if you want it to be more impactful, write the short thing because people are more likely to read it. I also think that we don't think about enough how if somebody is attempting to engage me in business, we probably have a lot more in common than we think. There's a reason that they're reaching out to me. I'm useful to them and they're most likely useful to me. So like distill that down, like get down to like what the benefit statement is early and short, and people are more likely to want to speak to you and talk to you. I think that the less you can waste people's time, I think, is huge there too.
I think also like from an agency perspective, you do want to try and build those really deep relationships with your clients so they don't go to another agency and figuring out how to appeal to them on a personal and professional level. I do work at Alyce, so I have to talk about the 5 to 9 of just like understanding what motivates that person as a person, because I'm not just the brand content manager at Alyce. Like, and if you want to get my attention, like, let's talk about murder podcast, let's talk about pasta, let's talk about cheese, let's talk about anything that can also appeal to my 9 to 5 or link the two together, something along those lines. But yeah, we're not buildings doing business with other buildings. We're still people talking to other people, and they have the same motivations as you do as a human.
Yeah, I think this transitions perfectly because we just talked about the tonality and actually understanding what you should post. So I'd love to hear, and especially this relating both to people who are trying to build their personal brands and agencies trying to build their brand. Can you guys chat a bit about picking your platform carefully and kind of what goes into how you decide what goes on what platforms you guys own? Because we're all kind of on every social platform, but there are definitely differentials between what we can post on each one and what's appropriate for each channel.
I think it depends. So yeah, picking your channel and your platform carefully is super important because you can post the long form stories on LinkedIn and you have to post your one-liners on Twitter. Like
Mhm.
character wise, that's what they're made for. But I think there's also there like very topical. There was this movement of all of a sudden people started to remember that Twitter exists. And a lot of the people who spent a lot of time on LinkedIn started creating those Twitter profiles or like re-picking back up the Twitter profile that they made in 2013 and expecting immediate engagement and immediate followers. And so first, like don't go into a platform and immediately expect followers and engagement to come because you just started posting there and the tone of voice is very different. Like I don't know if the people who joined from LinkedIn know that Twitter very much so makes fun of LinkedIn. Like that is
Right.
part of the Twitter culture. And so like suss it out and spend a little bit of time engaging and watching before you go and start creating content on a platform, just so that you also understand the vibe. It's like joining a Reddit community. You can't just like hop right on in and start posting because the audience is relatively like they don't like outsiders. They don't like
Yeah.
newcomers who don't
I
like get the rules.
Even if they're the same people, and I think that that happens a lot, and I'm gonna hate myself for even saying the words marketing Twitter together. But the people can be exactly the same. And you can even like sometimes I'll move my LinkedIn content over to Twitter if I think it's something that really needs to be said, but I don't expect the same level of engagement. Same thing when I do it backwards. Like if I'm going to post a really hot take on LinkedIn, I expect people to scroll right by that because that's not what they're there for. So it's expectation setting is really what it is when it comes to picking your platform. And I'm personally like, I prefer Twitter. I know there's a ton of people that prefer LinkedIn. It depends on a variety of factors. But Twitter is the place for me and what we're trying to do with self-control and cheese. So
Not always the most succinct. So sometimes I go on LinkedIn, but I do also have some hot takes or just like random thoughts, and I throw those on Twitter. So I think you can be on multiple channels and platforms, but you don't have to like commit to one and then never branch out. But also don't try all of them at once and only use the same strategy, you know?
right. The fact that the people are the same, people see that you're posting the same content across both.
Yeah.
So don't do it a lot. If you're going to do it, it makes sense, but don't do it a lot.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what we were saying, where like no one's gonna miss you if you don't post on LinkedIn every single day. So, but posting consistently will help you build the habit of working and living out loud. So again, that doesn't mean every single day, but like try and do once a week just to get yourself in the habit of it, especially if you're going from zero to nothing. Or my God, that didn't make sense. From zero to something. But like again, don't force it. Try and if you're starting for the first time, like try and pre-plan some content or just some content themes that you can talk about. Respond to comments, do something that will help you keep your momentum going. But again, don't it doesn't have to be an everyday thing if you have nothing to say. Like
Yeah.
it's
And
kind of both.
some people do have something to say every day. Some people are a lot smarter than me. That's
True.
awesome. And I love reading your content and I love reading your posts, but I also like, I think I sometimes feel like I'm not on social enough. And I'm like, Bridget, you're not a social media manager. This is like some of these people's day jobs. You have a separate job that you have to go and do. Um, and that's okay. And like the thing is nobody's going to your profile and like looking to see what you share every day. Like we don't even do that with the biggest influencers on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm only scrolling my feed. And like, what are the chances that like somebody doesn't see it or somebody like, we don't know. It's all an algorithm. Yes, of course, if you post every day, the algorithm is going to help you, but if people aren't engaging with your crap content because you're posting every day, it's not going to help you. So
We also got a question of when is the right time to log the F off when you feel like it's taking over your life. Also every day. Like don't wake up and check Twitter. That's a great way to develop insomnia. You're just not going to have a good time. I think Yeah, when you start to think, I need to post every single day, I need to engage, I need to respond to every single comment, and I need to like every comment, and I need to engage with 5 posts. Like if you set that much of a rigid schedule for yourself, it's going to engulf your life, and then you're going to be glued to your phone, and then Apple's going to be really mad at you, and your screen time is going to go up. I would say like set those boundaries for yourself. It's really awesome when one of your posts does well and you start getting all these notifications, but then it consumes your life. So know what your limits are and like work with those. Like we can't tell you like exactly when to log off, but like once you start to think about your Twitter followers more than you're thinking about your day job, like don't. You have a day job. Um, yeah, social media moves fast, especially Twitter. So it's really easy to go down a black hole and spend your entire day on Twitter. I've done it before. I'll do it again. That was my Tuesday. I was not very productive. But you're not going to get content ideas by living through others and just getting jealous that they have something to post. So like go live your life and then you'll have experiences to talk about. Create a schedule in other areas so that you don't spend all of your time on social media. So this also goes back to when to know to log off.
Yep. I think specifically I don't make a schedule for social media like Twitter or LinkedIn, but with the podcasting stuff that people have to seek out on their own, like newsletters and podcasts and things like that, you have to create some kind of schedule. Like we were doing podcast episodes every other Tuesday, and like, how the heck am I gonna like expect people to know which Tuesday of which month? Like,
yeah.
So we started, okay, we have to post every Tuesday. That way people know on Tuesdays, like this is what's happening. Yeah, I just think that personally, I'm really bad about sitting on Twitter. So this whole week I've just not had it open. And I always joke that like I'm going from the medium screen to the small screen, but I only have started looking at Twitter on my phone. And that's when I realized like, okay, you're not working right now, get back to work, instead of like having it pulled up on my computer. I think it's been really helpful.
Big facts. I also turn off the like immediate push notifications and only have it set so that I know if I have a notification, if I like open my phone. So that way I'm not checking my phone immediately when I get a new notification. Cause it's like I am part social media manager and I'll have Hootsuite open so that I know if something is happening, but like the actual platforms themselves, no, because I know that I don't have that self-control yet. Do have some cheese, but don't have that self-control yet.
Just going a little bit off of that, like don't schedule a post. Like people are going to hate me for saying this. And I know that it's very specific to marketers because all of us write for a living at some point. It takes me 5 minutes to write a LinkedIn post, like maxed out completely. And then I leave it and I close the tab and I leave it alone. And the best part is like, you can go back and change it if you need to. Like, don't dwell on it, just send it. Like, there's no reason. Yeah, there's no reason to sit there and like, unless you're for the company account, that's totally different. But
yeah,
I will draft out tweets when I think of something funny because I think I'm really funny, but then maybe it's not as funny as I think that it is. So hold those for later. But I think that there's too many people that sit there and they sit down and they're like, I need to write a post about this today, the newsletter. Like, don't do that. It's not worth your mental space.
Do we want to potentially do questions just because we've got like 10 minutes left?
Yeah, let's skip.
I'd just say that building that personal brand is all about like building a community first and foremost. So it's not just you alone in a room screaming. I think it's you want to be having conversations with other people, especially people who have similar views to you, but also people who disagree with you, who like keep you in check, keep your ego like down, and like force you to think a little bit more about what you're saying and if you actually believe it, or if you're just saying it for the sake of saying it because you thought about it once, so you thought, why not? And so that comes with engaging with other people's content, but it also comes with replying to the people who are engaging with your own.
Awesome. And then to break into questions, we do have quite a few. So are there any growth strategies that you guys use when promoting your own podcast? In case you guys don't know, they have their own podcast. But when it took off, was there anything that you guys did for any small time marketing or big time marketing that really helped you get to where you are?
Yeah, Sara and I joke all the time that we've constantly iterated. It's great that we kind of seem to have one brain. So like when one of us is thinking something, the other one's usually thinking the same thing. But recently we've started to get into video and we kind of figured out that like nobody was listening to the podcast and watching the full video, because why would you do that? And it was taking me forever to do the videos. So instead we started creating like different content with the videos, but from the same like audio recording, posting them on different days and then releasing the full podcast episode a couple days later. It's gotten us back to the number of listens that we were getting before, gotten us more subscribers on YouTube, had more content to post on every day. It's more fun. It's easier for me to do. Like, that's a win-win. So we like those. And I think to really kind of engaging with our community as the Self-Control and Cheese handle and ourselves has been really great too. Because people know, like, they put our names to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think also like tapping into the channels where you have the most pull is huge, because I really didn't start spending a lot of time on Twitter until like this year, especially like this fiscal quarter, if you will. Like, and so when I promote a podcast, I'm going to do it on LinkedIn because I know that I have more engagement, more followers, and like I can tell more of that story versus like on Twitter, it's like we got dropped a pod, go listen, or like ask me about my new vacuum. She's right there. Because I talk about it on the podcast, like those sorts of like quippy things happen on Twitter, but like the actual story and the motivation behind why we decided to use this topic or speak on this topic happens on LinkedIn. And I think also I wouldn't have started a podcast if it were a year or even a year and a half ago, because we needed to build our foundation first of like, do people even care what we have to say? Because if they're not going to engage with us when we write it down, they're definitely not going to engage with us when we speak it. And the same thing happens with YouTube. Like, people don't really know what we look like. And so like, why would they want to watch us interact? First, they have to listen to us. First, they have to read us. Then they can watch us interact. So it's all about like building up that affinity for yourself and your own personal brand. And then like driving more people to the different channels once they're bought into one of them.
Yeah. And I think that that's another way that we kind of test content too, is like, I don't know if anybody else has caught on to this, but Sara and I will create Twitter and LinkedIn content before anything becomes a podcast episode to see like if there's, and I think we stole that from DG, but why would I go through the hassle of creating an audio, like all of that stuff, if it didn't work with the same network that we're trying to reach on LinkedIn in a 5-minute post? Why would I spend an hour to 2 hours on it if it didn't work for 5 minutes?
I think that's awesome because, I mean, coming from the product side, we always do that proof of concept of that quick made landing page, just grab an email, build a subscriber list. I mean, it's exactly what Connor Gross did with that newsletter and those ads. And I think it's amazing to apply that same concept to social, because realistically, we don't know if what we want to invest in is going to work. But perfect. I think on that note, we will wrap it up. And if you guys want to stay in touch with us, our Twitter handles are right on the screen. I work for Unstack, so I got to promote Unstack. We have our own podcast too, on top of Sara and Bridget's, which is Self-Control and Cheese, which I think you can find everywhere. You can also find Zero to a Million, hosted by my boss, Zach Rigo. It's available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, everything. So go give it a search. And we'll send you guys those links right after this webinar wraps up and we can get you the recording.